when children, even teenagers who are exposed to this form of behavior, it scars them for life. It leads to suicide. It leads to massive mental health and emotional problems down the track. And the fact that at some point in Australian history, this was openly encouraged and said that we had to accept it, and we had to understand why these men engage in these acts. It's just unbelievable that that form of perverted logic was seen as suitable for broadcast in 1975.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder who they were thinking about in terms of their prospective audience as well. If you think about the narrative that they were trying to propagate, why were they trying to propagate it, and why were they given airtime on the ABC in the first place?
Just to get into some of the more gruesome detail of what was broadcast on this recording. So if you go to slide 4, Martin, so they describe some of these boys as, quote, physically delicious, which is just revolting. And they said that they were looking for boys that had faces of, quote, angelic beauty. How people could describe children in that form was just, that to me, I thought was quite unbelievable. The thing is that, so some of the other detail that they describe in this recording is one of the pedophiles basically said that he was seeing about 12 boys at any one time and going through some form of rotation. When it came to how they were acquiring these boys, they admitted that they were roaming around schools, high schools, acquiring some of these boys, and then they also admitted that they were actually accessing some of these boys from other pedophiles. So, i.e., there was a network of pedophiles in operation in New South Wales in particular, where they were sharing these boys around, and that's very consistent to some of the commentary that Senator Heffernan made back in 2015. In terms of the 28 people on that particular list. So there was a time where this sort of behaviour was quite rampant, and it was so rampant that it made it onto the public airwaves.
Yeah, so John, I guess I'm trying to sort of get my head around all of this, and some of the language and some of the ideas that actually are being pushed out through this particular thing, I find remarkable. What do you make of it? Why did they do this, and why did they actually allow this to go on the ABC in the first place?
Well, the thing is that in terms of why, the host basically said that one of the pedophiles who was interviewed, they came up with the idea, and it was worthwhile to communicate some of these ideas to the audience. But Martin, can I just say that the most disgusting, revolting, and evil part of the recording, of all the 42 minutes, the one thing that stands out as the most gruesome is that one of the pedophiles in their 30s started being a pedophile when they were 12, and they admitted to abusing their nephew who was only 3 years old. And when he said that, everyone laughed. I kid you not, Martin. Now, the audience may not know, Martin, is that I have a 3-year-old boy. He's the love of my life. His name's Thomas. Love him to bits. I couldn't imagine anything happening to my son at 3 years old. And yet, in 1975, people talked about abusing 3-year-old children, and they laughed about it. And that's why the ABC doesn't want people to know about the history of public broadcasting and what they used taxpayers' money for, because at that time in the 1970s there was a sick culture at the ABC, and there was certain political people being controlled. There were certain people at the ABC who were in charge, who weren't basically acting in the public interest, and they were promoting this. They were promoting this clear criminal behaviour. And one thing that I'll confirm, Martin, is that I spoke to a retired police officer this afternoon, and they tell me that the statute of limitations there's no statute of limitations for this conduct. So the people who were on the broadcast 50 years ago in their 30s, they'd be in their 80s now, if they're still alive, and the teenager who was on the broadcast would be in his 60s. Now, the host passed away in 2016, but if any of these people are still alive, if the police want to do something with these people, there is no limitations of the law. And the one thing I'll say, Martin, is before we get into some of the specific quotes, is that when this was broadcast in 1975, the Reverend Fred Nile referred this to the police, and to the best of my knowledge, the police did nothing. So there was no charges, there was no investigation, and it was all swept under the carpet. And the fact that that could happen then, and for 50 years, nothing has been done about this, and the ABC basically has pretended that it doesn't exist, and has even told Parliament that this recording doesn't exist. It just speaks volumes to the depth of the corruption happening in our country.
Yeah, and this is the point, isn't it? That corruption can touch a number of different entities, and they almost mutually reinforce each other to the point where what it means is that corruption can go on, and everybody just looks the other way and says, nothing to see here, and that, of course, is the problem, because what it means is that effectively rules are broken, the law is broken, and nobody looks to the right way, everybody looks away and says, nothing to see here, which is not acceptable.
I just want to give a bit of a taste of some of the other shocking statements that were made in the recording. So when it came to the issue of gifts, and they basically admitted they gave gifts to the boys, and the boys basically returned the favor with sexual gratification for the men. The quote that one of the pedophiles made was, quote, "Boys that age are naturally commercial in this society or any society." So this is the sick, perverted logic that they were explaining, that why were they offering gifts, and why were these boys participating in these sexual activities? The justification is that boys are naturally commercial at 12. Martin, I know that you've done a lot of work in terms of small business, and obviously you run your household surveys about mortgage stress and housing finances, etc. I would be surprised if you could confirm whether 12-year-old boys are naturally commercial or not.
Well, it's a question that shouldn't even be thought about or asked, is it? It's ridiculous. This is beyond the pale.
Absolutely. Now, Martin, if we go to the next slide, so the question was asked of some of these men about whether they were causing trauma in terms of these other look at whether they were causing trauma to the boys. And again, one of the pedophiles said, quote, "The boy is going to be traumatized by society and by the family anyway." So basically, the teenage boy is going to go through trauma. Doesn't matter if the trauma happens at the hands of a pedophile versus their family versus society. Again, this is the sick, perverted logic that was broadcast in 1975, and it was just unbelievably shocking. Now, Martin, if we just go to the last slide, just to round off this conversation, the last slide basically at the end of the broadcast, so at the end of the 42 minutes, the host, Richard Neville, asked these pedophiles the question, "Are you child molesters?" And immediately they were defensive, and they said, quote, "No way, absolutely not." And one person said, "Why are you even asking that?" And obviously, when I listened to this in 2025, I just cannot think what's going through their mind. And I obtained this recording 2 years ago, and the first time I heard it, I just couldn't believe that this was ever broadcast on the public airwaves. There's no chance this would ever be broadcast in terms of the 21st century. It's just too revolting. And Martin, I know that the first time you heard it a couple of years ago when I shared it with you, you were quite shocked that this could ever have made it in terms of the public airwaves.